Attending. Okay. Welcome, everybody.
Hi.
Great to see you all. Thank you for joining. Got lots of messages and emails of people from people saying, "See you tonight."
Yay. I've had lots of messages asking if it's going to be recorded. And the answer is yes.
Yes. I always thought that the it was a joke when anyone would like launch a webinar and say, "Make sure you get your limited spot," which I always thought was untrue, but it is true.
As we learn.
Yeah, as we learn, there are different thresholds. I'm like, oh, okay. So please register, even if you cannot attend. Hey, Connor. Oh, hey. This is really cool. We'll just give a couple minutes for everyone to come in. Whoa, okay, flooding in. That's awesome. And Tracy, just checking, you can see that, right? We've got the chat, the Q&A. So by the way, just a bit of admin while people are coming in. Um, we will have an opportunity for you to have questions at the end. As either of us is speaking, us two chatterboxes, we'll try and keep an eye on the on the Q&A. So if you do have questions, feel free to pop them in throughout. If one of us spots something that we can pull up during the webinar, we'll do that to prompt the other. But otherwise, we will definitely have a section at the end. We're going to try and keep this to sort of around 50 minutes, and then from there Q&A at the end to get through anything that is not answered.
Sounds like a plan to me.
Cool. Alrighty. I should put the actually I'll share screen and we'll go into presentation mode because then we'll let everyone come in. Does that look good?
Looks good to me.
You're like, we look great. Awesome. Okay. We have so much to get through. So we really want to crack on into here. So we'll start kicking off. So thank you. We've got Tracy Hemingway, aka Debt Free Diva, with myself, Ilsa from Wolf Property Coaching. This is so exciting, by the way, because we've been to a lot of events. We hang out a lot, but we've not yet co-hosted an event of any sort together. So this is cool. Thank you for joining.
Didn't we host one in Hamilton? That was us.
Oh, we have, not digitally.
Why
Correct.
did we that night?
This is really live online session, which is great because um, so many people drove to our event, right? So as far as from Hawke's Bay, the Mount, Tauranga to Hamilton.
Alpha.
Um, yeah, Topo. So that was great. So thank you for joining. And I guess just to kind of kick us off, hang on, should I not share screen? Hopefully can actually as a quick question to make sure the audio sounds fine. In the chat, can someone just sort of confirm, like, can you see both of us? I just want to make
Yeah.
sure
We
if
got a yes.
someone we got a yes. Oh,
Yeah.
awesome. Okay, so that comes up in the okay. Someone's raised a hand. Someone's on Q&A. Okay, perfect.
It's disabled. So we've only got the Q&A.
Okay, righty. Oh, okay, okay, perfect. Q&A. Fantastic. Okay, cool. Thank you so much for joining us. We are going to jump into this. And I guess one thing to point out is what's really exciting for the timing of this webinar is that two things that are different. The first thing is that I'm kind of known, I guess, with my strategies to focus on cash flow and yield, and 100% we want above market returns all day, every day. So that's always the goal. Tonight's case study by Andy, about Andy's New Plymouth, a standalone cash flow hack in New Plymouth, is a really awesome example of what is completely achievable, replicable in this month going forward into spring and summer. And it really is focused on leverage. We're really focusing on how you can accelerate the build of your portfolio, focusing on usable equity this time, as opposed to focusing on returns, which are a part of it, of course. The two come hand in hand. with cash flow hacking and the BRRRR strategy. But tonight we're really focusing on equity as a comparison to what you might spend 52 weeks a year earning. How do you use and leverage real estate investment to accelerate your progress in a wealth sense, in an acquisition sense of assets? And then the second thing that's really unique is that tomorrow is an OCR review, hence why I need Tracy.
Yay. I actually think they've done the review. We're just announcing tomorrow. So
Yeah, true. True. So what we'll do is I'll share screen and we'll go straight into this because we have 3 parts plus Q&A. So we want to crack in, hold us accountable. And by the way, no joke, I have set an alarm for 8 p.m. So if us chatty chums talk too much, the alarm will go off and tell us to hurry up. So awesome. Tonight, so welcome Tracy, welcome everybody taking a moment from your busy schedule ahead of tomorrow's OCR review, which will impact you one way or another as an active investor looking to BRRRR or trying to consider your options. So we'll start with an overview. Just a quick disclaimer, tonight's examples are generic in the sense of this is a possible case study. Also, by the way, it's not at all an extreme one. That's what I want to point out, is that this is very achievable, as I say, very replicable right now. And in terms of purchase price, renovation spend, total debt, this is not a unicorn deal. This is very much what you can copy and paste when you buy well and use the strategies that Andy has used from start to finish to execute here. And this is exactly what you should expect to deliver on for yourself coming into spring, and hopefully from tomorrow, even more positive environmental factors. And you will have a chance to catch up with Tracy or myself or both of us with a follow-up tomorrow so that you can book in to catch up. A couple of intros, so just really briefly, so you know who you are joined in with tonight. If you are a client, thank you for coming to catch up on this. Took my accelerators through Andy's case study a few weeks ago, and so we're going into a lot more detail. Actually, Andy, which is a couple, but to make this simplistic, they are on tonight. So thank you for all your contribution and all the details, which I'll do my best to share and showcase what an epic result you've got. So Andy is working with myself. If you're not already following, please jump into Instagram, Wolf Property Coaching. I've been investing for over 17 years. Part-time, moving into full-time on the tools and our coaching. There are well over 250 plus renovations of my own plus clients. That's a combination of Accelerate, which is standalone examples like tonight's, duplexes as well, home and incomes, if you will, as well as Boardroom, which is a different service we're not focusing on tonight, multi-units. I have about a $20 million real estate portfolio in New Zealand and building one overseas. And if you were to Google or YouTube, have been on a number of podcasts, including Checks and Balances, Keep the Change, Property Academy, all New Zealand ones, Everyday Millionaire from the US, Cut to the Chase, which is a real estate agent focused one. If you are an agent and have not come across this is Diego Tralia, top Harcourt's agent. You need to get the best tips and tricks from this man. And my one, Rinse and Repeat with Elsa Wolf. Also, just as a side note, please do tune in to Checks and Balances this Friday. There will be a very, very interesting multi-unit case study that Mike and James, the hosts, have to present, and been in a bunch of print. Tracy.
Hi everyone. So I am more commonly known as Debt Free Diva. Most people know me by that as opposed to my real name, which is insane. So I'm a financial advisor. I specialize in mortgages, investments, and budget advice. I jumped into the financial world. I had no knowledge of finance, ended up 94 grand in debt at the age of 24, didn't go bankrupt, paid it off in 3 years, bought my house a year later, became a property investor, decided I didn't want to be in that financial strife anymore. So I learned how to do it, and I learned how to teach people, and now I help people get into their homes and property investing journeys every day, which I love, 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 love.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And today we really want to help you from each of our perspectives, get the most out of the information from this upcoming example of Andy's. So questions specific to either the sort of lending, if it's specific to your situation, we'll definitely pop that into the Q&A for the end, so do stick around. But you know, we've sort of talked about this being how to make your salary, or how to make a salary in 7 weeks. So for many different professions, we've pulled out these stats regarding the typical incomes that you can make across these industries per annum in New Zealand. So quite a range there. Have a look. Perhaps you fall into one of these categories. And, you know, I think really the example we want to showcase tonight, myself from a value add point of view, and then Tracy from a lending point of view, is about the power of leverage, right? So it is through property investment. Real estate is the only way to leverage and move ahead above your self exchanging time for dollars. It's extremely powerful. I was also thinking the other day, it's not only the nice to have things or looking for, you know, the shiny things. It actually made me think about some essentials as well, that it's very difficult to retire these days. Not that I have, but from people I am surrounded with, people in my family, older generations, hearing stories of others who have worked really hard their entire lives and not been able to afford things like health insurance, ongoing life insurance, and that a lot of those additional items that help provide security to your everyday life need to come from or be funded from something additional. And I think that's a really good comparison or an additional thought to challenge yourself with. You know, can I have those needs covered while I'm working? Can I have those needs covered when I move into retirement after working? Or is there something additional that I need to take action on to do and do now? And that's really the power of the example we're going to show. So for tonight, we are going to show a few things. So focus on how Andy made $140,000 in 7 weeks. So if you think, you know, a gauge as that previous slide showed salaries for 52 weeks of work, $140,000 of net equity gain, by the way. This is not value add to the property. This is net equity added in 7 weeks, is an incredibly fast wealth creation success. We're then going to jump across to Tracy's OCR predictions, talk about the expected policies and changes that are going to be most prime for you as a BRRRR investor. And then we're going to divert and jump back to the results of Andy's renovation in New Plymouth and demonstrate how the results of this first renovation are going to pay for, or will be able to pay for, his second investment property, and just highlight how that works and what it could look like, how much he could spend, and why that is so. And then we'll have Q&A after that. So before we do that, we have a couple of polls, obviously, because we do want to know where you're at. Oh, hang on a minute.
And we want to make it active, not just us chatting to you.
Okay, awesome. So hopefully this pops up on your screen. We want to know where you're at. Are you, oh, cool. Oh, yay, go for it.
I just tried to vote and it said hosts can't vote.
No one cares where you're at.
No one cares. Fine.
So good. Okay, so oh, wow, that's awesome. How fab. Most of you have answered. Okay, we'll just end that in 3, 2, 1. Okay, what proportions do we have? Okay, can you see this as well, Tracy?
No.
No? Okay, so we have, this is really interesting actually. So none yet is 34%. 1 is 23%. We have, most of our attendees here have 2 to 4. So it sounds like you could be in that position where you're trying to unlock additional lending to make that next kind of push, which is often where that first roadblock can be if you have lower performing rentals or some potential that's untapped and you're looking to kind of work out how do I get my broker, how do I get Tracy to unlock some additional funding for me. And then we have 6% who have 5 or more, so that's awesome. We've got quite a range, in fact. All right, so that's really good to know. Now I know because because of the fact that a large proportion do of you do have rentals or multiple rentals, then I don't want to spend too much time going over the fundamentals of cash flow hacking. There are a ton of resources on my website. Jump into the newsletter. You will be subscribed, obviously, at this point, and there will be lots of information that, and prior case studies and webinars you can find on my YouTube channel as well that highlight that. But we will just kind of cover off the principles before we dive into Andy's case study. So, in terms of investment strategies, before we jump into exclusively talking about the BRRRR or cash flow hacking, which is a renovations focused strategy, property investment comes in many forms. And depending on your circumstance, there'll be different pros and cons of which strategies will or will not suit so well to your circumstances. Tracy, feel free to jump in as well because you talk to so many different investors and their situations on the daily trying to progress themselves, and you'll see so many different iterations or examples you might want to share, even if there are common ones. But if you went down this list, this is how I personally, at least through my experience and seeing all of my client situations, inquiries coming through, increasing returns come as you move down this list. So in a general sense, when you land bank or you buy land or bare land without a dwelling or something to rent as a home, that's generally the most heavy weighing on. It's a great asset to have, but there'll be limitations in terms of it'll be worth something, and if you have debt but little or no income, that can hold you back very quickly. Slightly or better than that would be moving into new builds, which might be spec builds off the plan, and they take a period to draw down as you develop them. They generally have lower returns because the cost of those materials is so much greater than that of an existing build, which was built decades ago. Further up that from the ranks from there. Oh, did you have something to jump in?
I was gonna say, and the costs are increasing. So when we're doing
Yeah.
lending, we're still having to build in a 15% contingency, and sometimes clients even go over that. So
Mm.
the
Is
new
that
build,
because is that because of the physical build, or is that because of time that always protracts on that build?
it's the time. And my biggest challenge at the moment with a couple of my builds and some subdivisions that clients are doing is because it's taken so long, council contributions increased in that period. Because obviously
Oh.
pay the council for the privilege of building your house on their property in their
In the district.
um
Oh, right. And because they actually qualify those at the end, right? So they charge at the end, therefore they could have inflated from start to finish.
yes, yeah. So
Right. Okay.
new builds definitely sometimes what you pay at the end is a little bit more than what you anticipate
Mm-hmm.
before you're already tapped
Mm-hmm.
out equity from the word go.
Well, and that's like, and I have to say I have no experience in that world, and that's actually what gives me discomfort because I'm a bit of a control freak and want to have pace. I mean, you can kind of hear from the tone, I speak too fast. Is just how do I retain control, get the results, have as much certainty or lack of uncertainty in a process to get to an outcome that I can determine, like predetermine, which is the strategies that myself, my clients live by. um, and therefore, time with you, like when you start to have to involve the council and you include uncertainty, all that means is time, which equals more cost, in my view. So that's where the times that I've deviated from my core cash flow hack strategy, or I've said, okay, let's do something additional. That is where by far the time and cost has protracted, and that's when they've got involved. So, hey, there's definitely a time and place. We definitely need more housing. It's just a more costly, longer term project to get that off the ground, is what I would add into there. For tonight, the example is about renovations focus, cash flow hacking, which we'll define in a second. And, when we think about existing builds, there is an awesome unfair advantage with existing build properties. The last few years and the previous government made it seem quite unattractive in the sense of interest deductibility being removed. That's now, fortunately, a thing of the past that we really don't talk about anymore. And as of the 1st of April, it's a level playing field, right? So the income you get is the rent. Expenses are treated the same from new builds to existing builds, but the only benefits that come to existing builds that are exclusive are twofold. So number one, you get to manipulate the redundant or old dwelling. Doesn't mean it has to be the worst house on the best street by any means. It's about identifying a value add opportunity that you can repurpose, update, modernize of the house itself. So that's improving the improvements, if you will. So when you look at a registered valuation, or you look at a CV, council valuation, your title is split into two parts of value. There is the land, and then there is the buildings. The buildings and the fences and the sheds, all those parts are called improvements. So you have the land and improvements. So when you manipulate the dwelling, you manipulate the improvements to improve the property. And then you also have the land. And with existing builds, you have these beautiful original subdivisions from the 1950s onwards generally. And as district plans improve and intensification prevails, we're always looking for ways to add additional parcels of land so that we can add more houses and house more Kiwis. So new builds, the developer has already milked and maximized how many dwellings they can develop onto the original piece of land. But with existing build land, that gives you many exit strategies. So whether it's an immediate benefit you want after the cash flow hack with higher returns, or if it's something that you want to park away for a future date as a second value add or a second dwelling, or perhaps selling it for a premium for that privilege, that comes exclusively with the existing dwelling. The sweet spot, actually, Luke Kemi's from Keep the Change actually coined this, and I picked it up. He said, like, okay, cool. So the sweet spot is being in control, having a fast timeline, ideally not having consents or very little, and a cost-effective renovation where you add a bedroom for roughly the same cost. So he summed it up so beautifully. We want time and cost efficient, low to no red tape. And we want above market returns because if we're going to add usable equity, that fast tracks our deposit, but we're also going to add an additional bedroom to the right house rather than the one that you can't add a bedroom to, because that's how you manipulate a higher return. If you're adding returns to the cash and you're increasing a deposit more quickly by forcing appreciation with a 6 or 7 week reno, that is how you're getting ahead of the market. It's one thing to have an existing build that you don't cash flow hack and you allow that to build in its organic value 6 to 8% per year. But let's say to build that usable equity or deposit for the next purchase, maybe that takes you 4 or 5 years, because what we can't foresee is the rate at which the market does grow in capital each year. So the issue there also is that by the time you've waited for that growth in value, all the other properties have improved at that same rate, right? Do you see this, Tracy, like in terms of the growth of your clients' portfolios, if they're taking an active approach on renovating versus holding on to build? Do you notice the difference in terms of the pace of that next purchase?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, my first rental, is a classic example. So I bought my first home at the height of COVID, December 2020, bought whatever I could. I knew nothing about the real estate market at the time. I wasn't an advisor. I was just like, yep, that's a 3-bedroom house. That'll do.
Mm-hmm.
Terrible investment property if I want to like grow quickly, because it's a 3-bedroom unit that's on a unit title. You can't add an extra bedroom into it. I mean, I've managed to add an extra toilet and a deck and zhuzh it up, but that's not going to
Love it.
zhuzh, bit of zhuzhing. Well, it had some
Does help.
purple when I bought it.
Had what?
The bathroom was purple.
I feel like that fits with the brand.
No, it was even too much for me.
That's a good point, actually. Like, yeah, so kind of what you're pointing out there is unit title, which is one aspect I haven't mentioned, but buying, the type of title, right, also determines the level of capital growth and your level of control. So from a cash flow hack or BRRRR point of view, to have utter control over what you want to do to your property, assuming it's non-structural, which is where the council will get involved, you can do what you like on a freehold site because you own the house, you own the land. That land is freehold, or fee simple. Unit title and cross lease, you are tied somewhat to a number of neighbours. So if you have a unit, like I've had a couple of units in blocks of 5 in Ellerslie and Remuera, which I thought, oh, that's great. That's an amazing location. Why would I not buy? And I was actually advised to buy in those suburbs, but by buying a unit title in one case and then a cross lease in the other, um, especially in Remuera, I had neighbours who peered through the windows to check what I was doing, checking if it affected the flats plan, which which may have also adversely affected their version of the flats plan. So I understand why they would care, right? Because in fact, we all co-own the total parcel. So of course they're worried because some neighbour that's not sticking to the code or doing things correctly can compromise the value of your land. So for that reason, I would never want to be in a position where someone else is controlling the value of my land. And so for that reason, cash flow hacking needs to be on freehold land.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean I managed to turn mine into an Airbnb, which is a different type of cash flow hacking, but
Yeah.
trying to get through the body corporate on my units was rough, is the word I'm gonna use.
Euphemism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely, just to bring it back to what you were saying, trying to get a fee simple title that you can
Mhm.
renovate and control is
Mhm.
the way to go. But in turn, some clients can't afford that, so they just have to cope with that. We're going to have a slower growth in terms of
Mhm.
equity, and then it
That's a
comes
good.
just right.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry, not to cut you off. Yeah, that's a very important point because it's more important to start and scaffold up and build up. So maybe, like you say, let's get the 3 bedroom unit that has the purple bath and let's cosmetically improve it and get wicked cash flow. Let's Airbnb it, get some short-term rental premium cash coming in. How many years have you had that for? And then what's your next step from this one, would you say?
Uh, that has been 2 years. I'm gonna say I was lucky, but I think I just took my own advice and I locked it on a 3% interest rate, which is only rolling off
Whew.
next. So I just took all that cash to drive down the mortgage as much as possible so that when
Mm-hmm.
it eventually, because mine went obviously up in value because I bought it in 2020, skyrocketed, and then it fell off the face of the earth again, um, as we all know. So I just
Mm.
cash flowed it, whacked off as much as mortgage so that when I'm ready to go again, I have as much usable equity as possible.
Mm. That's such a good point, right? Because if you find, say, you even had a 3 bedroom unit that non-structurally you could add that additional room, if you were on long-term rents, that would be one way that you could accelerate the appreciation of the value of that property. And I think that's a really important point. Well, we're coming back into spring, so I'll use my sunscreen analogy. So, say you have a property, you have an existing build, whatever the title, and you cosmetically refresh it, it will do a job to improve the rent, to some extent. But if you can cash flow hack and add that internal additional bedroom, it adds so much in terms of value because if it's a 3 and then it becomes a 4 bed, the comparables, if you have to sell it, liken it to a 4 bed, which is generally tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars higher based on sales. And I think of that as a sunscreen effect because you're creating extra value, as you'll see. And we should jump into the example. If that value is increased by 20% initially, but then the market comes back by 10, you've lost half of the potential value. You know, you've lost half of the value you've created as opposed to buying something you don't add value to. And if it comes back by 10, then you've lost half your deposit or more, right? So there's two different scenarios there.
Logan's just come in and said, how do you add a bathroom without consent? Assuming that's means
Oh,
like,
okay. Let's just park that. I definitely will cover that. That's a really good one. There are some hacks around it, and there are other case studies that we can point to. It's not actually included in this one, but there's a simple building consent in here for a second toilet. So we'll jump into the case study. I know you're here for that. Just to highlight as well, just in terms of definitions, this is a really good slide to just quickly jump onto. Top left here over here is a standalone house, which is like the example that is category that we're talking through tonight. Coming down to the bottom is a home and income. This is actually a Hamilton home and income of my own, where it was one huge house that I split into two as two dwellings. Over to the right hand side is a multi-unit up in, oh, actually, sorry, down in Palmerston North, which is where I'm heading tomorrow. So watch my stories. And at the very intensive level, bottom right is a 12-unit dwelling, which in fact is the example on the checks and balances podcast that I mentioned. So if you jump on that for Friday, you'll be learning all about the significance of how you can supercharge the BRRRR. For the purposes of tonight, I just wanted to explain sort of from top left to come down and round, increasing returns and increasing your leverage improves as you move from one dwelling to two to multi. Now, what cash flow hacking is all about is I live by this all the time, and it's one thing I just sort of threw off the tongue, and it's become something that's been repeated back to me so many times. Capital growth does not pay the bills. If there's anything been, so nothing's been more true than this in the last few years, where cash flow is literally king, and if you don't have it, you don't get. Capital growth and gains is really nice for a future benefit, great for drawing down on, but you can't walk in to the supermarket and pay for your groceries like this. So I think over the last few years, that's really hit home for a lot of investors, especially existing builds with a lack of interest deductibility. And certainly the market is coming back to see that you need a balance of both. Okay, there are different strategies you can take on, but capital growth is for, if you think about it as a future benefit. Oh, sorry, it's cash. Oh, what's happening? Cash flow is going to help you with that liquidity on a daily basis. Is the property taking cash out of your pocket, or is it putting it in? Okay, so cash flow hacking is not. Let's start by defining that. As an example, it could be any house. It could be a 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom. But in this example, 3-bedroom house, get 3-bedroom rent. You're getting and buying an average market return. If you buy a 3-bedroom house and you get that 3-bedroom rent, it is what it is. It's how it presents, and that's the cash flow you're getting. Cash flow hacking is when you pay for 3 bedrooms, but you convert into a 4. So it may be a 2, you convert to a 3. You are getting an above average return, and you are improving the value of the property when you effect these targeted renovations. The graph on the left, if you see over here, we've got this zero neutral mark. This is the Opus Partners ROI spreadsheet, which I still love. Thank you, Ed. And the brackets on the left is negative gearing. So the floor plan I just showed you is a real property. It's actually a different New Plymouth property, which had a break-even point of year 14, as you can see. But the cash flow hacked version of that floor plan, where we added the 4th bedroom and where we added, in fact, also there a second toilet, that same house changed to the right-hand chart. So that the break-even is somewhere between 2 and 3 years. That is the same house on the left and right. All right, quick poll. Love a poll. Let's go to what do you need more of before we jump into this? Are you thinking? So hopefully, cool. What do you need? Oh, we have more people here than we did 10 minutes ago. Okay, awesome. You're getting into the thick of it. All right, so what do you need more of? Is it cash flow, which is income servicing? So it might be your primary income, it might be a side hustle, property investments, share. What is it? Or is it equity? Cash flow. Oh my goodness, this is so interesting. We'll shut this off in 3, 2, 1. Whoa, this is wild. Okay, Tracy, you can't see this, Tracy, can you? It's always like a game. Okay, what do you think the proportion is? Cash flow versus equity. What's the percentage?
Oh, right now I'd say 70% cash flow, 30% equity.
85% cash flow.
Oh, I was close.
That's the most skewed results I've ever seen, actually. So, and do you know what? I think that correlates to.
I'm not surprised with interest rates. In all honesty.
Yes, right. Like that kind of hangover from the last 2 years, and also of interest rates, but also a big portion of you here have 2 to 4 properties. So kind of in that pinch point of needing to release more cash flow to make that next kind of jump. Alrighty, let's jump into the case study. So, Andy, this is really awesome. This is their first renovation. I say they because we've called this Andy, but it is a couple who is newly engaged and awesome humans who I'm just loving working with. And this is a 7 week renovation in New Plymouth, which happens to be where I'm from. And I'm really excited to share this because we've had a lot of activity in many other regional centres, namely Whangarei, Rotorua, New Plymouth, Palmerston North, Dunedin, Christchurch. The numbers you will see from this case example are absolutely copy and paste in those locations. But for a while in New Plymouth, we've not had one. And what I want to highlight is that for this example, Andy has found a superb location and basically made the most of the opportunity that was what we'll take you through. A deceased estate that the children of this person were trying to basically flick on. They didn't really want to be involved. They wanted the cash, they wanted out, and that really fell into Andy's lap. Where it's quite funny. He and his fiance started, and after 2 or 3 weeks, they were getting super impatient. We went through the strategy, onboarding, case studies, and he said, "Oh man, I could never be a fisherman. I can't just stand there and wait for this thing to come to me." I said, "What are you talking about? It's been 2 or 3 weeks." He goes, "Oh, okay." And I think because we have such high expectations and objectives for Accelerate, um, it's for a reason because we want to get the best properties acquired and results to keep you moving forward, of course. Um, and I think where he and his fiance started looking was at the worst houses, and there were a number of auctions where they do have a privilege of living here. So there is a bit of sweat equity involved in this, which is not the usual case. I would say they definitely are the exception and possibly the only clients I have had on the tools in the last wee while. But what they were trying to do was find the worst property, and we were having good cracks at those properties, but because they were auction, they were more difficult to get control of. So what we'll talk about here are some strategies that it was interesting. He sort of sent me some audios today, and it was really awesome because I think what they did really appreciate was the amount of groundwork and due diligence that went into the wrong properties, so to speak, really added to their toolkit. And I tell this to my Accelerate clients over and over. I say, like, don't feel disheartened when you don't win, you miss out on a purchase, because if anything, the learnings from those that don't go ahead add to your brain, your artillery, and reshape and refilter what you want going forward. And honestly, the amount of knowledge that came forward into making this a reality for them as their first renovation was they're so happy with, because all of that prior work led to them winning a multi-offer, very competitive situation to buy this property in a superb location. So the first step here really is, how did Andy buy this property? And this is where the first sort of third of you are, which is, hey, I've got my home, I don't have my first rental yet, I'm trying to work out how to pay for it. Almost without exception, all of my investors are buying using 100% debt. And if you think about that compared to a new build, it's actually more than needing just debt to buy the property. We're throwing renovation debt on top. So there are two components. Tracy, you jump in if you want to as well. But basically, most commonly with my investors, we're looking at a split bank approach. They're going to take their usable equity, or 30%, on their home, and that's 30% of the property they are buying. And then they are going to buy the balance, or 70% of that new property, on the house itself.
So you're essentially paying 100%, but it's across two banks. So you top up, you get like a top up mortgage. So we've got home A, this is where I live. Let's get a little top up of 120,000, and we'll take that to bank B and give it to them as a deposit, because bank B might give us more servicing because every bank is different. And that's where you get your lending from.
Mm-hmm.
And your purchase.
Awesome. Yep, exactly. So 100% lending, 70% on the house they're buying is the picture you saw, and then a 30% on their home. Here are some beautiful pixelated before photos. from the listing. So it's a 3 bedroom, 1 bath property with a few fish hooks. And I love fish hooks. My clients love fish hooks because these are the things that make properties opportunities for us where others don't spot them or perhaps can't get lending through an advisor for because they have fish hooks. So the first thing here was really the massive win to secure the property. And I have to say, I want to highlight these points because this is very usable knowledge for you to take forward into any property you're buying. Um, Summarized on the left hand side, basically the children of the deceased estate kind of wanted to wash their hands of it. So that's a great situation for buyers. It had a tender method of sale, which basically means a set date of sale. Um, we came into this, and Andy and his fiance came into this going, okay, we've missed out on a few other properties. They were definitely inferior and in location. This is a very coveted location, a driveway immediately across the road from a high decile school, very central New Plymouth, connected to public transport, lots of corner shops, lovely area, strong owner occupied suburb where people kind of move into, bed in. But because it had been occupied by an elderly man, it really, honestly, like I had to put a rental value on it, but it actually would not even be habitable, unfortunately. A few other opportunities presented themselves to us. So unconsented works, which I'll show you very shortly. Most first home buyers cannot go near this. The lending will have no confidence in them to support such major works when they look up the listing. The strategy that Andy took, which is definitely what won the opportunity, is that because it was listed for, gosh, I need to check actually. It was sort of suggested. It wasn't listed, but 399 was a suggested price. And to be honest, in the suburb, it's easily fives and sixes, as you'll see from the results. And so, due to the state of it, most buyers were either put off or didn't know what to do with it or didn't know how to quantify how much the renovation would cost to get it to a top rental state. So largely the market was cut out, or they would have a conditional lending approval where they needed to make an offer at tender date with finance and build reports, etc. We gathered as much intel as possible through a line of questioning with the agent to find out that it was definitely a calculated risk that was worth taking to invest in a building report, a meth check. Probably didn't need that, but it's a bit part and parcel of what we do these days. So building report, meth check. So let's say $1,000, $1,100 for those two. LIM, which we expedited. So that might be from a $300 increases to $400 to get that within a 3 or 4 working day window. And basically have total advantage on our due diligence. Send the sale and purchase agreement to the financial advisor or broker, lawyer, get the title, sign off on all documents so that we could go in with a cash unconditional offer so that Andy knew, hey, look, these kids really don't know what they're dealing with. They are not investors themselves. They just want it passed on, get their cash, move on with their lives. And so for that reason, having a cash unconditional offer at 420 won the property. And also what was interesting, coming to the unconsented works, the property file said it was a 3 bedroom, 1 bath, 1970s house with one separate toilet. So looking at that floor plan, you might think, okay, it's not really super typical, but it's roughly how you've seen Ilse's other cash flow hacks. This is actually what we walked into. This is what Andy walked into. So up the top part there behind the dining kitchen, there was a really, really well built carport, earlier carport that had been converted into a rumpus, really good quality, actually had full ranch slider opening out back on the dining end. Really, to actually emphasize, the size of this could be a 1 bedroom unit in its own right. It's so large, extending along the kitchen and dining, and also the lines to the bottom left-hand aspect here, where the doorway had originally been here, and I guess you could say the dining sort of protruded more onto the driveway. At some stage, a vendor had completely enclosed this without consent. It was not in the property file, but what it actually allowed us to do was create the 4th bedroom. So what some buyers could not get lending for because of obvious mismatch with the property file and not knowing what questions to ask, they could not get lending, whether it was the 3 bed or 4. We took absolute opportunity to convert that space into a fourth bedroom. And the reason that that worked, if I just go back, sorry, is that had this extension not been here, to be part of the house, there is no way we could have given access to the dining room, which became that fourth bedroom. So this would have been a circumstance where this three-bed house would have stayed a three-bedroom house. We could cosmetically spend $65,000, $70,000 to make it awesome. And for a family moving to come to this school, they would have expected awesome. Certainly not a three-bed, one-bath house. They would have wanted at least four bedrooms. They would want space for probably a work-from-home day or a COVID office or a study area. And definitely those parents would not be sharing a bathroom with the kids. So actually, what was unconsented works through our due diligence. We checked with our insurance broker contacts and our PAL team and disclose everything. Like, it's your only best results come from disclosing everything you find. If you hide something and it comes up and resurfaces later, it's only to your disadvantage. And through this process, we managed to, with our builder, demonstrate that the build was completely to code and completely watertight, and the insurance was completely happy with it. So we just moved forward with it where other buyers probably would have cowered away. Upgraded the kitchen. So if we go through the cash for hack principles, rather than have that kitchen which cut through to the dining, with that new wall, we were able to create a C-shaped kitchen that through that window that's taken at night time that actually looks out into the rumpus, because that's a converted space, as I mentioned. The kitchen had, as you can see on the left, very little technology, no appliances, certainly no dishwasher. So also with that, we upgraded to a mains pressure. Really important if you're increasing a three bed to a four, that you consider not only converting from low to mains pressure, but also look at the size of that hot water cylinder. And if you have the opportunity and space to, move it up outside. If you're upgrading it anyway, just move it outside and give yourself another cupboard or storage area. And also lights. There were no lights in the kitchen. There was just natural light, and there was nothing on the ceiling. Sorry, just moving back to the bedroom, because on the stories today, it was awesome. Lots of you participated sort of in a duplex floor plan that I had. Just wanted to highlight here. There are several ways that a bedroom needs to comply with the building code to be a bedroom. We're talking about converting already habitable space here, which is in this case the dining room. It's not a garage being called a bedroom. If you wanted to convert a garage into a bedroom, that would be converting from uninhabitable space to habitable space. That requires building consent through council. That is not what we've done here. In fact, we've reinforced the structure by adding in a cosmetic wall. We've not detracted from the integrity of the building. We've repurposed a habitable space. In terms of the size, to be a children's bedroom, it's a minimum 5 square meters. In this case, an adult is a minimum 6. I always insist with my clients 7.5 or 8 minimum to get a decent sized bedroom is the way to make it usable. And also the other compliance with that is you must have a window with natural light that is at least 10% of the floor size, and 50% of that window must open. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking or revisiting that duplex floor plan. Now, the bath, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I'm going to have to like hustle you along because we only got 2
I know.
minutes.
Okay. Before the alarm goes.
That,
yeah.
What year was this?
The Reno?
Yeah.
Last month.
Oh,
so super relevant. Yeah.
Then we've got this one you might be able to answer. What happens if you buy a really old house with no plans? Is it not consented, or are you free to do all unconsented renovations?
Yeah. So typically, and there are many properties and instances where we buy existing build properties where there are no files. It doesn't mean you should not buy them. It means discuss with the council. Often they'll say there was a council fire and that's why all the reports are destroyed from decades ago. That's not uncommon. There are 2 different ways you could look at that. As long as you get the building report, you get the compliance and the due diligence and the reports that satisfy your lender and your broker, and also your insurance broker. Very importantly, make sure that you disclose all of that information. If you can get lending and insurance and you've discussed it with the council, then you are fine. It's very common these things were drafted up on bits of paper in the past. They weren't digital, and there was one copy. So it's not at all a showstopper. What it means is that it's really on your shoulders if you're going to renovate a property to do things properly and to also add them into the property file so that there is a good track record and a what's a word breadcrumbs that the next buyer can pick up. Because if there are holes in the information, all that does when you're selling as the vendor is reduce your buyer pool, is the best way to put it.
100%. I
From the bathroom, yeah. Looking at the bathrooms here, typically a cash flow hack in a sort of lower decile suburb where, like, to be honest with you, a $420,000 purchase price is usually a lower decile location than this, which is a very high profile suburb. For that reason, for this example, we added in $1,500 for the new Plymouth District Council building consent fee, and I put light touch plumbing. So what I mean by that is on the after photo to the right, you've got the toilet on the left, that's the original. In the bathroom, it looks like a typical layout, but it was really generous proportions, and you can't see, but behind the wall, parallel to the original toilet, is the second toilet. As long as you progress your building consent paperwork before you settle, it will fit in with your 6 or 7 week renovation. In fact, I walked through this place while Andy's dad was like water blasting the entire house. Bless his soul, like adding so much sweat equity to add and amplify to these results. On the right hand side, I walked in and I could see that the drawings had drafted for sort of a typical, the rounded shower, 900 millimeter. That's quite typical. In this case, that bathroom is so large. I said increase the vanity and increase that shower. Make this a distinctive place where parents who will walk in with their kids who are going to go to the school walk in and go, wow, like that's a bathroom I want. So they went the super large shower, maximize the bathroom, and as you can see, there's still space on either side of that vanity. So it's a really well proportioned family bathroom and a second toilet, which is completely expected. The most important thing is that when you renovate to be appropriate for the location and for what is expected by the most likely tenant. Just very quickly, this is all cosmetic stuff. So interior and exterior repaint. For an internal repaint, that would be a core scope. In this case, Andy and his family mucked in beers and barbecues. Friends came around. I saw them there scrubbing, spraying. They really stretched their investment in the paint to the full, which is awesome. And because they had a sprayer, they actually sprayed all the fencing, which massively sharpened up the landscaping and added rental appeal. And flooring, pretty self-explanatory, but like when it comes down to fittings, compliance, you can see they added a heat pump, they upgraded the light fittings, but they kept the fireplace and just modernized that space. There was a ton of redundant design on the walls that didn't need to be there, upgraded both the carpet and in fact adding carpet to the massive rumpus or second lounge, really added to the original square meters that were the rental property. So post-hack floor layout, large rumpus, second lounge added, painted, carpeted with ranch slider. Basically, you've got a massive double living room house with 4 bedrooms and a second toilet, which you can see there in the bathroom. Fully insured with no exclusions, guys. So don't shy away when you see something is unconsented. The result here was that we disclosed everything to the broker. Everything has worked out well. And there are more future options, as I say, that rumpus could be completely self-contained with further investment and working with council. So this was a very dark house, I have to say. And he had to work super hard. They had their dog there hanging out while they painted and painted and painted this entire thing to make it fresh, white and bright. Looking at cash flow, so I'm making sure we move along. Just want to compare because I don't want to not talk about the cash flow. So while this place was not anywhere, as you'd see, anywhere near being Healthy Homes certified, it was very difficult to put a rental value on it because it was owner occupied, but there were very low decile cash flows in the suburb around the 400s. I've just assumed a 430, given it actually couldn't be rented. But at that level and at a mid 5 point something percent interest rate, anticipating tomorrow, this would have still been more than $1,000 per month or 271 top up. If you were to say, let's cosmetically buy a house, right? So if you couldn't cash flow hack, but you could fully renovate and get that same look of finish or level of finish, that 271 top up per week would have reduced to 186. So let's say the rent got up to a low 600s, which would be a sort of somewhere between a median to upper quartile rent for this area. You would have improved that cash flow by close to $100 per week. In reality, what Andy affected, because he bought the right house in a superb location that has a balance of high capital growth, and they managed to increase the rent by 63% by cash flow hacking. So if you think about a renovation spend, you might look at 65 to 70,000 or 60 to $70,000 for a cosmetic renovation. We've their budget and their costings were 70,000, including a cash flow hack. So walls, which are materials, labor, a little bit of electrical, plaster paint to get that additional room in. Same timeline. The top up is $100 per week. So I actually had a message from Andy saying he thought, gosh, we're just below an 8% return and we almost didn't go through. He said today, he said, how crazy would that have been to not have created the result that has leveraged them into their next pre-approval right now to buy their second property right now. And we aim for an 8% return, all of our clients for Accelerate, but it's an arbitrary number in the sense that we want, basically what we're saying is we want to set the goal really high, but in this case, there was a bit more balance to get a wicked location, add massive value, and look at the 4-bedroom comps to say we need to do this, and look at the difference in cash flow. He said, as the rates come down tomorrow, this will look even better. So, purchase price 420K, renovation 80. So they actually landed somewhere between 70 and 80. So just including a bit of buffer there, all in for 500K. 640 was the post renovation registered valuation. So they paid for a report, that was the valuation. They made a net 140K equity after 7 weeks. So that is 640,000 less 420 less 80,000. Before we go into how they're going to leverage into the next one, Tracy, maybe you want to kind of explain how that works.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try and make this nice and brief, guys. So with LVR, which is basically how much equity or deposit you can use for each house. So main bank will only lend up to 70% for investment property, and that should have said 80% for owner occupied. So you can lend up to 80% of your owner occupied property and use that as a deposit for your investment property. Non-bank lenders will potentially go down to 20% deposit instead of 30% needed for an investment property. Just depends. Now, servicing, so this is a huge thing. So servicing is basically how much the bank determines you can afford. So we all know how much we can afford, but the bank will always stress test you at a high rate. And they also take into account things like occupancy rates, rates, insurance, all those things. So the bank will actually scale your rental income up to 85%. They'll only use up to 85, depending on the different banks, because they always assume that you've got X amount not rented like per year. They also use your main income and other income. For those of you that know me and follow my stories, I'm the side hustle queen. Sometimes side hustle not to be used as income. So that's a different strategy. But yes, any other income like dividends received, any other investment income can all come into it. Test rates, the banks will always test you. Stress test you up, they're still at 9%, some of them, but some of them are currently as low as 8.5, which is exciting.
Do you think we're expecting, what's going to happen tomorrow, Tracy? What will that do to test rates? Good segue.
For those of you that are ANZ clients, you might have seen that today they came out with their 5.59 for 12 months, which is the lowest we've seen in 3 years or so.
Well,
which is insane. So OCR, there's a real jump in the industry between a 25% and a 50% drop, or basis points rather. So neutral OCR, which is what we're aiming for, is 3%, as long as inflation's below 3%. then the banks will typically add a 2%. So we're sitting at that 5% interest rate, which is normal, what they deem
Mm-hmm.
normal.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that ANZ came down to 5.59 today means that we're getting pretty close to that normal rate. But even if it drops 25 basis points tomorrow, that's still a win for all of us. I don't know about you guys, but I'm still on a 3% interest rate and have to refix still.
You're one of the smart ones who actually did that then. I don't know anyone who's left. I know one person who is. So
Yeah,
that's amazing. That must have been a 5-year rate. Oh no, no. Was it
it was 3-year rate.
3-year rate? Wow.
Had a
Yeah.
high low equity margin, refinanced, got my 3-year rate, locked it
Which
in.
is which is and I know that like it's all relative, right? So from a 3% jumping up to maybe a mid five, that's a massive increase on a day-to-day basis. The great thing though, on a positive note, is for those coming down or neutral to coming down in terms of change from their current fixed rate. Um, 5.5 or thereabouts is actually moving this strategy and cash flow hacking into positive post-tax cash flow, which is something no one talks about. Positive cash flow. We haven't talked about it for 2 years because we haven't seen it
No,
for so long.
yeah.
So, okay, cool. So I'm going to ask you about your predictions then. So what do you think is going to happen tomorrow and then what's going to lead into spring and summer?
I don't quote me on this. I think there's going to be a 25 basis points.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they'll go down to 50. Remembering that they've got another one in November, which is on the way. So I think if they did 50 tomorrow, we'd be screwed for November, whereas they might do a 25 tomorrow and a 25 in November.
Mm-hmm.
Just because inflation's still a little bit high on the high side. We're just
Yeah.
above 10%. So
We
it's
just, yeah. Well, we're just in the normal band, but they're not that confident necessarily, right? We're not in the sweet spot.
yes, yeah. It's not down to that 2%. It's still like high two,
Mm,
borderline three. So I think 25 basis tomorrow and 25 in November is my pick.
mm.
Which means coming into summer, because then the next OCR is not till February. So now we've got
Ah, November to February because of Christmas, New Year.
yeah,
So 3 months,
yes,
roughly.
yeah. So
Okay.
all summer we know it's like a flat level playing field for interest rates because we haven't got another OCR in February, which is I know it's technically
Mm,
summer, but for our summer, December, December, January, Feb, we've got 3 months.
hmm.
Which means I think that there's going to be some good deals out there. So at the moment, stock is still really high on the market. So there's heaps of houses out there, still averaging more than what it should be. So what's happening is you're still getting those deals because we've still got to get that stock off the market. So I reckon we've still got 3 or 4 months before we get into this position where we've depleted all the stock. It's all supply and demand, right? More
Mm-hmm.
more people supply, like it
Yeah.
supply as we go.
Hmm. In
And
terms of values, what would be great is if we can get more vendors to come on, because seasonally, leading into Labour weekend, coming to spring, is emotionally when more vendors tend to bring their properties to market, which I really hope happens because as well as rates come down, or anticipate that they come down, if more stock can come into the market, that will give us as buyers a great sweet spot to have more choice and still get the great prices before values move up. And so the cool thing is also before we move into what Andy's results enable him to do next. The cool thing is you can renovate 6, 7 weeks. You can lock in a post reno registered valuation, give that to the bank, re-leverage, move on to the next deal. But the cool thing is time doesn't stop there, that we're at the bottom of the market. And so as the values do eventually move up, that value add continues. You've locked in the 640, but it will continue to grow to create more equity in the background. So we're actually on that cusp of finally being able to get a really great bang for buck on a reno spend, and then it will keep going.
yeah, absolutely. And you can still get a tradie. It was a tough 20 for a lot of tradies. I laughing, but in 2021, when I build a deck, I could not get a tradie because they were too busy.
Mm,
At the moment, I'm definitely seeing valuations are increasing. in the background. So we are getting more and more registered valuations on properties where they're coming up to or over our expectations.
Mm-hmm.
A change because the last 2 years we've had to go back to vendors and ask them to decrease, borrowing amounts and stuff or
Mm,
amounts.
mm-hmm.
Use the different bank policies. So split your lending if you can. Not every bank is the same, and you can typically get more lending from one bank than another. So if you're not already doing that, learn the different policies and use your current bank, get your deposit out, take it to
Mm-hmm.
somewhere like that.
But through someone like yourself, right? Like it's impossible, I think, personally as a buyer, like I don't know those policies. I don't kind of care, to be honest. Like on a daily basis, they change. So that's not where I put my time to be most knowledgeable. I have a broker, financial advisor. Would you, is someone cutting themselves short if they go to back to the same bank every time, or what's the opportunity cost if they're trying to upskill on all the bank policies? Is that a good use of their time?
No, I mean, there's 28, I work with 28 banks and lenders. It's my day job. It's my full-time job to know what these policies are, but they're always
Mm,
changing. And we get training on it all the time. I had 2 different trainings today with different banks on their new policy.
wow.
So
Mm,
I use a broker because I'm not allowed to write my own mortgage, but even I use a broker to get my stuff
mm.
done because even
It's
though
basically, yeah, like matching your circumstance to the best policy, right?
correct, yes. And
Mm,
how you can use because it's us against the banks a lot of the times as well. So it's like, how can we use your policy to get what we want? Like we want
mm.
that cash flow property. How can we utilize it?
Yeah,
Someone's just asked, we have an OCR announcement in November 2 team. Yes, yes, we do. Yep.
yeah, excited. And this is the thing, actually, just noting that. I was looking at all of my personal fixed rates, and all of them come off after either tomorrow's rate review, or the November one. And I've made a little, like, I agree. I don't think there'll be a 50, I think 50 point drops would be significant given there's still, like you were saying, we're not on the core safe inflation sort of band yet. That, for my portfolio, I've just assumed there'll be a small decrease. And when I run the numbers on my actual interest, the swing is six figures. So if you think about when you want to build a portfolio and you want to play in those larger figures, yes, the rates are bigger, the values are bigger, but you have to be so on top of the figures or work with someone who is, aka debt-free diva or broker, because it's fine to want to play with big numbers, but also everything increases, including the risk, and so you need to have someone who does have those expertise to be on that. And that's not something I would even pretend to know for myself. I need a professional who can say, "Hey, look, you've got X out of whatever number of properties rolling." The swings of cash flow are massive when you have multiple properties. And so it's one thing to really keep top of mind is you need buffer in the account, and you need to work with someone who can advise you and help you plan to hedge cash flow risk.
Yeah, and we can also work out for those of you that are trying to lock on 6 month rates at a time, we can work out what the next 6 month rate should be to beat your 12 month rate. And sometimes it's actually not as good as you think. Sometimes it's better to lock
Mm.
months, but that's my job as an advisor. It's what I do all day, every day.
Cool. Okay, that's an awesome segue. So we'll go back into Andy's New Plymouth results. Post renovation RV of 640K. So what we want to show here is what Tracy's explaining is that, hey, you can go up to 70% on your investment property with many main banks or many lenders. And so when you renovate a property, you add significant value in the right way, super fast. This registered valuation of 640, the new 70% loan to value ratio of that is 448,000. So technically, ignoring servicing for a second, if we look purely from a loan to value ratio point of view, this property can have $448,000 of debt against it. And keep in mind, when they bought the property for 420,000, that 70% was $294,000. So still a 70% ratio as an investment property, but because it was 420, 70% was of that smaller figure. And that's that bit there. So the potential is this piece in the middle, which is 154,000. Okay. So how will this property buy a second? So again, purely from an LVR, loan to value point of view, that usable equity of 154,000 that you could draw down on the New Plymouth property, technically, that becomes 30%. So how do you calculate what can $154,000 buy? If you take that as your 30% deposit, $154,000 divided by 0.3 gets you a new maximum purchase of $513,000. And it's really cool because Sarah, who works with me and put all of this together to help Tracy and I today, she's a new investor and she was going, hang on, I'm looking at these numbers and I'm going, hang on, that doesn't look right because the leverage is so strong and it's like, hang on, how do you get a free house? And it's definitely not free. But I said, no, you're right. That's the whole point of the strategy is that you leverage, and when you execute really well, this is precisely the methodology. So $154,000 of deposit, which you draw down, is $513,000 as a new purchase price. So how do we illustrate that? You buy that next property, wherever that is, for 513. So basically, in summary, that 154,000 is the 30% deposit, and the 359 is the balance on that new property. So exactly the same as we did before. You roll the value add as a deposit, and you move into the next purchase. One thing to point out, by the way, as to how well Andy has done. It's so long since this was what was possible. There was often a time in higher LVR when the deposit moved to 35 and 40%, where that usable equity of 154 would have given you less leverage. But here, $530,000, some of you would have clicked, is that the New Plymouth property was 420. They spent less than 80, so they spent less than 500K all in, and yet the result from what they did, or what they completed on that property, actually allows them to buy a property that is worth more than what they spent on the last, which is so powerful. All right, I'm just going to stop my share here. I lied about the timing.
Yeah, what happened to your alarm?
I was like, we're not going to make this. I'm going to check it. Cool. Hey, can you see the poll number 3? We are very close to the end, team. Want to get to your question. So, what is holding you back from buying your next one? Is it fear of the unknown, lack of knowledge, cash flow, usable equity? And 3, 2, 1. What's that?
Can't vote.
You can't vote. Yeah. Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. So cash flow is half. Okay. Okay. One person said waiting for the perfect time to invest, which is great because there are other options and you can be in control of that. So 43%, so nearly half is cash flow. And then it was just a general spread of lack of knowledge. Smallest was fear of the unknown and usable equity. So cash flow is what everybody is after. Okay, so cash flow hacking to improve the rent by 63% in that example was a very compelling way to increase the rent from what would be a very average one. Very average cash flow.
Can I add a comment on that as well? If you are going in for more lending, just make sure that your current lending is extended out to the loan terms are extended out, because that will definitely impact your cash flow as well.
Oh, yes. Okay, right. In terms of the remaining term, once the bank would look at principal and interest to repay?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome. Very true. And also in terms of a return on investment for renovation spend, which is a common question as well, $70,000 to $80,000 is a lot of money to put on top of a purchase price. So just before kind of moving forward on that, is to highlight that a best practice would be to get $2 on your one would be an amazing result. And in this case, Andy actually achieved nearly a 3-time return on that $80,000 Because if you look at 640 less the 420 in terms of value add, not net equity, but the value added was 220,000, which is nearly three times what they spent on the reno. And a good explanation for a portion of that would be the fact that they really stretched what would be, if it were full retail, that spend would not have bought the external repaint on top of the internal works. So by them mucking in and putting that sweat equity in, they've definitely been paid back for that. So we'll get to Q&A very shortly. So just wanted to highlight, okay, we've got these different reasons why you have or have not been able to make another move. And kind of wanted to highlight here that from the example we've shown you tonight, it's really about putting yourself in the most strong position from a servicing or income point of view and an equity point of view, or creating usable equity to propel you into a stronger position in the eyes of Debt Free Diva or a mortgage broker so that you can move into the next one. So if you're looking to do this in a timely way where you try and retain as much control as possible, this is the type of strategy that Andy has come to us for and has executed beautifully, and is now just awaiting the final sign off for them to be able to roll into that 513K next purchase. In order to work with a project of this type and nature, like this is the numbers that I've shown you, 420K purchase, we are definitely achieving in regional centres, high 300s to low 400K in all of our projects. So this is not an exception. The results are awesome, but the entry point in terms of purchase price, this is very typical and what we would expect. And to get started, you would need usable equity of around about $200,000, and that would give you a split of the deposit for the first property as well as a renovation fund for a project of this type. So if you're kind of recapping on those, the strategy and the benefits, so time and cost efficient, where you don't have to wait for a year on council, etc., and turn a cash flow hack around in 6 or 7 weeks to then build your deposit, get ahead of the growth curve on the rest of the market, and look at something that gives you both capital and equity growth as well as returns. This is what the Accelerate program is. That exactly what Andy has come through. We have the most incredible power teams around the country, and I think it's only like every day, every week, I realize how impressive and how it actually impresses more upon myself how valuable the power teams are to my clients. And whether you're in Iceland, which is where I've had clients be, walking around a volcano, signing a sell and purchase agreement on a property in Palmerston North, is the same level of remote as being in Auckland and buying in Palmerston North. It doesn't matter how far you are. If you're remote, you're remote. And the one thing my clients say is it's the confidence of being able to invest while remote, by being remote and living their best life, is actually something that is a step apart. Because when you're working with suppliers that you don't know and you're trying to get them to site, you're trying to get different people who don't have a relationship to coordinate and hustle for you, I tell you that contrast is absolutely night and day. The core of the program is working one-on-one with myself. So coming up with whatever, your broker or Debt Free Diva says, here's your lending outline, you've got X amount to spend, and if you create an 8% return, this is what it can help you get. We use that lending template to work out your personalized plan for either a single project or a 12-month. Most of my clients who join for 12 months are completing 2+ BRRRRs or cash flow hacks. So it's incredibly fast acquisition in the terms of your overall investing lifetime. Also, an on-demand portal for learning and live group sessions, which we have regularly. I can definitely say those who join and maximize all of these levels of engagement, both community and one-on-one with myself, and attend the regular WIPs, are definitely the most successful. So throw yourself completely in. We just had the most amazing, wicked vibe Reno roadie. Roughly every second month, I'll try and give everyone a couple of weeks notice to go, oh my gosh, we have this amazing cluster of renovations in a specific location. Give everyone as much notice as possible to get there. Most recently, a whole bunch, real estate agents jumped in and went, whoa, if you're bringing like 50 investors up to have a look, doesn't mean all of these investors are looking to buy there. They want to see, along with me and the team, pre, mid, and post renovation properties. They want to meet the power teams. They want to meet with each other because we're largely digital, right? When we catch up, my clients are all over the country. So it's such a good excuse to get together. and definitely our teams are building everywhere. If you are a tradie and you want to work with us as well, not just as an investor, but if you've got value to offer my clients, and I'd love to keep building up the teams, and this is where we currently have those teams constantly growing, even if I have a location that I wouldn't call a power team as such, but definitely have a great network. This list is continuing to grow all the time. Um, it's incredibly rewarding, and we do have awesome fun when we're together, but we support each other both through our internal Facebook page, on our regular whips, and through all of the case studies that we share like this to put into the education portal. And it's definitely never a single game. Like, you need the community and you need that support of each other to extend your knowledge and exponentially improve your results. So I'm just going to put one final poll up here. Hopefully you can see that. And by the way, we will send out an email tomorrow with a lot more details and links to our websites, and make sure that you've got the ability to replay this. I know we covered a lot. Close that down shortly. But yeah, you will receive the replay in an email tomorrow to check in and have a free one-on-one with either Tracy or myself. Awesome. So I'll close that now. I mean, we'll jump into the Q&A very shortly. Is there anything that you wanted to... Actually, we will. We'll just jump into Q&A because
Let's just jump in. Have a Ben.
Awesome. Okay. Um, okay, here we go. So you'll be to roll again straight away. Was there anything? Okay, so Logan's one we had. I have a rental that I can easily add a fourth bedroom by simply putting up a few walls. Do I need council consent or an architect involved? Auckland based. So when you are affecting changes to the building, that will ultimately come down to the building code. And therefore the build team at whichever council it is can help you assess that. And the word of truth is the power team. So your builder and anyone else involved, so electrician or plumber, if they're involved, alongside the builder, they will be able to give you their professional and licensed opinion on that. If it is structural, by a general rule of thumb, you will need a building consent, and that's probably what the power team will say. What we tend to lean towards is, if you have 2 3-bedroom houses, as an example, one can't be cash flow hacked and you get market rent, even cosmetically, versus have the option to buy one with the right physical attributes that we've taught you to look for, and make the most of based on that raw canvas. You're going to be able to get a higher return by converting it to a 4-bedroom, and we will focus on the ones that are non-structural because it's faster, cheaper, and, as I say, needs no red tape. So if you don't need structural concerns, and if the builder's comfortable, then they should be able to get on with that for you, and that will probably take 1 to 2 weeks if it's that simple. Okay, if the council is aware of the unconsented rumpus, do that. Okay, so a rumpus is basically a hangout space. When you start trying to call a room a bedroom, that requires a change of use, because if you think about someone sleeping in that, it needs a certain level of structural integrity that comes back down to the building code. A rumpus is a hangout space, so it's, you can paint, you can carpet. You often drive around parts of Auckland and see a Skyline garage has curtains on it and there's a rug or carpet. That is still not a room to sleep in. That is just a hangout space. So that is totally fine. Often you will see a downstairs of where you have a house up top with a basement with a garage. Oftentimes a garage door is converted into a rumpus or a window. That generally does not require consent, and your builder can be the final say on that. But generally speaking, if the lintel's the same, the structure's the same, then you can do that without consent. And basically, when people convert to a ranch slider in that environment, they are creating rumpus. So no. If you borrow 30% against an owner-occupied property and the remainder from another bank, how is the renovation funded and which lender?
Well, you can borrow up to 80% against your owner-occupied. So I would advise a client to borrow the Reno funds against their owner-occupied, because typically a bank will only lend up to 70% of the purchase price on the sale and purchase agreement, unless you use cross equity, and then they'll give you a bit more.
Mm.
So,
So put
which,
it on the owner occupied's your
yeah,
answer, right? So fund the renovation. Yeah.
yeah, make sure
That would
there's
be the most common that I see. Yeah.
unless you can cash flow it.
Yeah. How does the existing negative cash flow help help them get to the next property? Okay, cool. And also the LVR on this property once reno is completed is 78. Okay, so that's where when it revalued to 640,000, the new 70% was, I think it was 448. So actually, then there was a drawdown of 154,000 available for the next move based on an LVR point of view. Negative cash flow. So what we need to look at here is that it's about a 7.5, 7.6% gross return on total debt, including the renovation debt. What the bank will be looking at is if it were the original house without that and it was on the 400 and something per week rent instead of the 700 and something per week rent, that cash flow top up would have been, I think it was negative 273 or 71. That will be a part of, correct me if I'm wrong, Tracy, that will be part of the consideration of the income and servicing for the specific lender. Would that be right?
Yeah, absolutely correct. So normally they back it up with your primary income.
Mm, yeah.
So they say that based on your primary income, we can tell that you can upgrade or pay an extra X amount a
Hmm.
week.
Yeah, so exactly. So in the cash flow hack scenario, $100 per week top up, that is post tax. So that is looking at the end of the year, IRD says you owe us X amount for your small portion that's left in this year of the non-deductible interest. Next year, that'll be redundant or irrelevant, but that $100 per week top up is so small relative to a property that's unrenovated, as in that example, or say a new build that you're paying for debt as it's being built and you have no income against it, or if it's a return of less than that 7.5, then that top up increases. How big was the added extra bedroom? In this case, about 8.5 square meters, I believe, 8 to 8.5. Minimum 7.5 would be a single bedroom for properties that we pick up. The course that we were focusing on, so Accelerate, if you go to my website, is to do with standalone or sometimes dual two income properties. So that's Accelerate on a single project or a 12-month basis. Anything you want to highlight, Tracy? There's so many questions in here.
Oh,
I'm sure we can also download and we can add them to the email if we don't get through all.
can
Oh,
you use,
yes, we do. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, can you use equity to pay for renovations without using second tier lenders? Not against the purchase price of the property. So a bank will typically, if you take them a sale and purchase agreement, they will lend up to 70% of that price. I've had a client recently who we settled on that property and we just went for a top up because we bought it way below market value. So we had 80K to play with like instantly. So we just went for a top up and she got her 80K and did some renovations straight after. So patience game on that. You can use equity, but you just got to play it right.
Yeah. Do I work with anyone famous? Oh,
Ooh.
oh, you probably do as well. Yeah, so there is an internal Facebook community within Wolf Property, so a good proportion of clients want to be involved in that. If you actually rewind 4 years or so ago with Opus Partners, when Ed and I were sort of promoting the service, we talked a lot about it being one-on-one personalized coaching, and actually we have continued to bring in a lot of clients who want to be incognito or not part of the community. They just want purely one-on-one. So you may lean to more towards that direction, or you might want to be in the community. It's completely up to you as to how involved you want to be. But what I have found is there are sports players in particular who are really fond of the strategy. They want to be completely behind the scenes, but they see the benefit of investing their awesome incomes into cash flow hacking to basically create their retirement plan, is what I'll say. Is Wellington a region a bad place to invest? I would not ever really label any place that. It ebbs and flows in every location, every market. What you might be commenting on is that the vacancy time is very high in Wellington between rented tenanted properties right now. Many macro effects, restructuring, reduction of government roles, um, people moving out of Wellington. So there is a higher vacancy in between, is what is noticeable right now. But I'm sure that will change as it always does. Do
Um,
you ever deal with transportable buildings?
yeah, so we
Actually,
said,
Tracy on lending. Do you want to talk about that?
yeah, so well, there's about 4 or 5 questions on the transportables.
Awesome.
So I literally was dealing with a client today. So one of the banks has started to loosen up their rules a little bit. Obviously we got rid of the triple CFA, which was counting your coffees a couple of months ago, and now they're actually starting to get better on transportables. So they will look at it as a construction loan under labour only, and they will use the register valuation on the end project.
So upon complete value, register valuation.
Correct. Yeah. So my client today,
Cool.
our issue was we could only lend up to 80% because it was owner occupied. We're about 120 grand short of the 400,000 that we needed for in equity wise. So I went to the bank and I was like, right, tell me, I need this money. Give it to me. How are we going to do this? And they said that we can do it upon completion, but we have to use a construction loan to do
Okay.
that.
Is that
Construction,
residential rates for that construction loan, or what are the rates of a construction loan?
yeah, so residential rates on a construction loan.
So drawn down in proportion to the value being added as they build, right?
So it just means that every time um so say you need to draw down when they finish building it, you got to draw down a little bit when they deliver it, and then draw down when it's connected to piles. Oh, now I've got a thumbs up. This is on my screen. So I just normally interest only my client on a floating interest rate until the complete drawdown is finished.
Gotcha. And then you can fix, right? It,
Yes, and then we
yeah,
fix the whole lot depending on their
cool.
financial goals. So I've had a
Okay.
few build granny flats, but this whole construction thing is going to be insane. But yeah, definitely have done quite a few granny flats recently.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. Do you think the other main banks will come into favour with that? Because obviously it's growing in popularity. National Party, well, government, is posting about it regularly. We don't know all the ins and outs, but 60 square metre granny flat is literally that second future value add for cash flow hacking or existing build investment strategies. All my clients, they've cash flow hacked, they've got their awesome returns, they've added value. In many cases, they can leverage that, in this case, 154K will largely pay for a 60 square metre
Granny,
build,
yeah,
granny flat. Um, my husband has Air Home with Williams Corporation, and they are adding these 60 square meters or smaller to exactly these types of properties. So you can basically double down, get another 2 or 3 bedroom rent, cost a fraction of buying the original house. Will massively improve your yield, and possibly by leveraging usable equity to pay for it. If the bank lets you access that, then you're improving your overall cash flow, right?
yeah, absolutely. And the banks, I've done 2 granny flats in the last 3 months. So they're definitely
Oh,
lending against it. You just got to
cool.
have enough equity.
Okay.
Then you do it in upon completion valuation and it increases your equity and you use that for the next one.
Oh,
Yeah.
of course. And then once it's on piles and it's set in, it's going to add a lot more equity. So use the leverageable equity, usable equity to buy it, get it on, and
Yes.
then the net result is actually stronger again.
Yeah. And you can turn a 600 a week property into what, 1,200 a week if you get the right granny flat.
Mm. Hmm.
So
Yeah, I think that there's so many cool designs because 60 square meters used to be maximum, sorry, 2 bedrooms. A lot of the designs now, you don't need a hallway. With clever floor plans, you can get 3 bedrooms in there, which will double the cash flow you're getting on, in a house that's 2 bed turning to three. Fully
yeah.
renovated is the same as that 3 bedroom new build 60 square meters. So you could double.
Yeah.
Awesome. Um, I think we have covered most. Besides cash flow, how can you increase rent? Are there any other strategies to convince the banks or lenders to approve borrowings from usable equity? Usable equity but serviceability of the interest is tricky. Yeah, so ultimately, I know this might be one for yourself, Tracy, around it's two parts of the equation, cash flow and usable equity, right? And that's all your incomes on a gross basis, but they will shade them as they want to their policies.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's one or the other. Unfortunately, we can go to a bank and say all we want, oh, but I can, but I can. If it doesn't fit with their policy, then you just got to figure out a way to earn more money
Yeah.
or drive your mortgage down a bit more. That's
Book in
where
with your side hustle queen tomorrow to have a chat
that's where my
about
side hustles go, man.
side hustles. Awesome. Hey, thank you, everyone. I think we've gone through the key themes of the questions, but these will download for us and we can answer anything remaining that we haven't quite spotted. Thank you. Awesome questions. So many of them. Hopefully, it's answered. If not, you're welcome to flick us an email or we will make sure we add that into the email that comes out tomorrow. You'll see the links you can book in with us. Thank you for joining. Anything last that you want to throw in, Tracy?
No, just thank you guys so much for joining us on your Tuesday night. I hope everybody learned at least one thing. That's all I care about. Make
That
sure
they're going to use. That they're going to use.
you're going to use.
Put it into action. Thank you, everybody. Love to hear from you. Hopefully, catch up with you for your free 20-minute next week. Have a great night.